Je ne parle guère français, donc nous avons Claude, la voix du ciel, et les petites machines. So I am trying to learn French, but it comes slowly. Your language is beautiful and complicated. Yeah. So I'm here to speak about ethical concerns in cancer treatment. I would like to take both parts of that sentence and look at them. First, to look a little bit at what do I mean by ethical concerns? What does ethics actually mean? Because we don't always have a common understanding of this word. The first thing is that there's a difference between ethics and law. Ethics does not just mean follow the law. That's legality. Law is for things that are clear-cut. We make a law about it. It's against the law to do this, it's against the law to do that. Ethics is for what the law does not cover, because discernment is required. So we are now in a realm where there is of necessity going to need to be a different kind of attention than the more rote sense of legal, illegal. There's going to need to be an aliveness to the situation and a capacity for insight under conditions of ambiguity. That's different than law. Now, of course, it is also the case some of the time that there is a conflict between the two. Because of this, we've had a civil rights movement, labor union movements, times when the law was not ethical and people needed to say, hey, something is wrong here. This is the law, but it is not ethical. We need to change the law. Other times, the law creates broad parameters. And then there are situations that the law does not cover. And yet we still have a sense that there is a right and wrong. We still have a sense that there is a righter and wronger, even when we are not quite sure what it is that we must do. Discernment is required for gray areas. The primary organs for discernment are the heart, which is the seat of insight and understanding, and the small intestine, which sorts the pure from the impure, the clear from the unclear. So I am going to suggest that any discussion of ethics, this one being an example, requires the presence of heart. What I mean by heart is that thing in the middle of your chest that, take a fist, a heart is a muscle about the size of a fist, sometimes just about as tight. Put it on your chest and make invitation between your heart and your fist to slowly unclench. See if you can let the muscle area in your chest soften honestly at the rate of your slow, compassionate fist. We cannot force a flower to bloom. We cannot force a heart to open. We can give it compassion, and the more patience we give it, the sooner it will open. Many of us have somewhat shell-shocked hearts. And just this fist opening exercise is one of many exercises for helping this area in the chest not to be a tight place, but to be a place where we start to feel that actually there's an empty space, a luminous space. The character for the heart does not have a flesh radical because it's an emptiness in the inside, a place where light can dwell. The place for insight and understanding because there's Shen. How much Shen? How much space? It's very physiological. Insight is physiological, right? There's some kinds of moods, you get into a certain mood, and how much insight are you likely to have? Oh, let me think about what I'm going to do, or let me think about what I'm going to do, or what am I going to do? Right? These are not physiologically insight-prone states. How do I become physiologically insight-prone? It begins with the island of peace, the empty space, right in the middle of the storm, so that I can have insight and understanding, be fully present. Yes, I feel what I feel. And there's a place for Shen to dwell in the midst of it. Because we don't want to be making our ethical discernments from the sway of our emotional reactivity. In order to be ethically competent and ethically responsible, we need to work with our own grief within the situation that arises. We need to work with our frustration and our conviction that it should be otherwise. We need to work with our fear. And we need to work with our regret. Regret may be one of the most important emotions to have heart space for, because in making an ethical decision, it is very tempting to merely reaffirm what we have already done in the past. Well, it's what I did, so it must be right. And thus avoid feeling regret. By and large, we increase our capacity to be ethical beings as we increase our capacity to feel difficult emotions, painful emotions, conflictual emotions, and yet not be caught in their sway. This does not mean dissociating from our emotions and get up into our head. It's like, oh yes, there's an ocean of all kinds of feelings there, but I'm just going to ignore them, possibly suppress them, and deal with this situation in a logical manner. This is not an insight-prone state. It's disconnected. There is not more Shen here. So we do need physiologically to be insight-prone, to have some place where we're not caught in the raging ocean. But it needs to be a place that is not disconnected from our humanity. So all cultivation of the heart as space, as locus for arrival of Shen, benefits the physiology of insight and understanding, and thus benefits the ability to make ethical decisions. It's very practical. All emotions are either pathological or healing vectors, depending on whether they are felt in service of the heart. Every element, every organ, many countries these days are run as a democracy, and so we can forget that our body, our being, is not a democracy. It's an absolute monarchy. The heart is the emperor, and every single organ is healthy to the extent that it is in service of the heart. And it becomes an illness vector as soon as it becomes self-serving, self-perpetuating, not in service of the heart. So we have emotions like fear, which if it's fear that is not in service of the heart, immediately becomes an illness vector. Oh no, oh no, oh no. We feel the body change right away in fear. But when it is fear that has not lost heart, when we keep heart, when the wave of fear doesn't knock the emperor off the throne and send the emperor washing through the ocean of fear, when the emperor is on the throne and we are afraid, we sink into a deep, alert awareness that allows us to sit in the dark and listen in the silence and see the first stars that are coming out. There is a radical health, a virtue cultivation, when we do not lose heart in the presence of fear, and thus we remain morally responsible, ethically capable beings, even in the presence of fear. It's the same thing with anger. Anger that like a wave has knocked the emperor off the throne and is just self-perpetuating. I'm right. Yes, but are you in service of the radiant light? Well, when we keep heart, when we do not lose heart, even though we are angry, we become true activists of love. We are here standing for a better future than what is going on in the present. We become visionary. We are saying this is not right. Things can be much better. There's potential that is not manifesting. I have a dream. And it's the same thing with all the other emotions. When I am in grief, and I have lost heart in grief, I learned yesterday the word ébloui. I confused it with ébloui. That was a problem. But to lose heart in grief, you know from your body, clearly this is an illness vector. It's terrible what happens. The changes right away, the collapse in the lung, the downcast, the inability to find the sparkle anywhere, like an elevator shaft that just goes down. But when I am able to keep heart, when I am able to grieve and say something precious has been lost here, and keep heart, that grief is now one of the finest tonics for the value system that it is possible to find. And the lungs and the colon are healed by such a grief, rectified, made more upright, more able to live according to my highest values. So we need not fear it. In earth, worry and guilt. It's like, should I have done that? I don't know. Maybe I have to take care of it. We can ruin our digestion very quickly when the washing machine of worry knocks the emperor off the throne. We know right away the terrible things that happen inside. But if we are able to stay with this circular emotion without loss of heart, then what we have is a sense that yes, circular thinking is healthy because the world is round. And what goes around comes around. And I am concerned and caring like a farmer who cares for all the crops. I want to know how my actions are affecting the whole ecology. Instead of guilt, this becomes thoughtfulness, considerateness. And this thoughtfulness, this considerateness, it is healing for the earth element. We need not be afraid of this. In fire, what shall I say about that? This desire to connect and have really good, solid, like we're connected here and everybody like me, right? And having everything make sense. Next thing I know, I'm having anxiety, panic, confusion. When fire and its desire to make connection and make sense of reality is no longer in service of the heart, chaos internally and possibly externally as well. But when this natural radiance of light, that of course extends and extends and extends and wants only to feel that sense of connection with all light, and that sense of clarity. Yes, I know what's going on here. It is not confusing, it is clear. When this is in service of the heart, it is healthy and healing. So I want us very much, in any discussion of ethics, to reckon with our emotions, to notice when we are ethically disqualified because we are in a personal emotional sway, or when the emperor fell off the throne and we are disheartened, when we have lost heart, so as to be able to say, this is not a decision-making moment. This is not a discernment moment. This is a self-care moment. I need to go back to my practices that allow me to bring that emperor back on the throne, that allow me to open the island of peace right in the middle of my emotions, so that my emotions are actually deepening my humanity, but in the service of something greater than my humanity. I'd like to say a little bit more about the heart's paired organ, the small intestine, and its importance in ethical discernment. The greatest travesties come from premature clarity, otherwise known as oversimplification. The small intestine sorts, and when we feel a sense of confusion, this is not a pathology. This is a signal. It's like a little light coming on. Small intestine at work. Now, whether it is working well or not is a secondary discernment. But just the feeling of being confused or uncertain, unsure, feeling like the situation's a little too complex for us, a little at sea, this is not something to be feared. That feeling of ambiguity, that feeling of confusion is a good sign that the small intestine is not oversimplifying. It is a good sign that the small intestine is preparing to embark on a deeper level of subtlety. That is not a moment to shortchange. The more complex the situation, the more ambiguity, the more subtlety is required. How much damage is done by, in the sway of emotion, generally, emperor knocked off the throne, the small intestine says, it's his fault. It's got to be according to this principle. It fits inside of this box, and that's all there is to it. If we can't discern and we are afraid of our own small intestine's process of moving through the gateway of confusion, through ambiguity to subtlety, then we will blame, then we will judge, then we will adhere to principle blindly. And then perchance when we do come back to our hearts, we will regret. And we will have to take that courageous moment of keeping heart, of not losing heart, even as we stay in connection with our humanity, our regret, and say, oh, all right, I will do my practices for the physiology of insight and understanding. And then as I sit with that, and as I allow my small intestine some digestive time, figuring, musing, where does that process take me? I wish to encourage us as a community to support this in each other. I will be speaking to you about my own journey. I will be presenting you with some data. I will be presenting you with some of my own thought process around that data. My intent is not to cause you to think, feel, or decide anything in particular. I suppose an awful way of putting it is, if I am successful, you will walk out confused. You will walk out more aware of where there may be conflict of interest. You will be more aware of quandary. You may be more aware of places where how you handled things, now that you think of it, may not have been how you would handle it now, if you had the chance to do it over. I do not want to tell you how it is. I want to encourage you, and I would love for us to encourage each other, not to stop with easy answers, but to sit with each other and give us ourselves that digestive time and digestive space. Yeah. I call that community support for ethical process. It is very, very different than trying to convince each other of anything. Like what? You eat something and then you try and convince your digestive system, you should bring that to your muscles. No, 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 send that down to your liver and make blood. No, 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 use that to send it up just support good digestion. One of the most important things in any process, and we are in a process-oriented medicine, is a healthy process leads to a healthy result. So even if we don't know exactly where it is that we are going in our ethical discernment process, in our journey of mulling and discerning, if we have a healthy process, if we have a process that has not lost heart, that is in fact opening and bringing in insight and understanding, respecting the small intestine's pace, then even if it takes a while, it's all right. Because we know that the boat is moving in the right direction. We know that we're moving in a healthy process. Yeah. So, bringing all of these skills to the question of cancer. The first place where we engage ethical discernment in cancer is with the cancer diagnosis, which in itself is its own disease vector. There's the cancer, and then there's the cancer diagnosis, a cause of illness in its own right. Right? Somebody's walking down the street, having a nice day, living their life, feeling good about things. A week later, they get a cancer diagnosis. Compare the health of this person from 1 week to the next. Nothing has changed. But a lot has changed. So just working with the effects of a cancer diagnosis as a disease vector on its own is very important. One of the most important things that tends to happen in our culture when a cancer diagnosis enters the picture is fear of death, usually ratcheted up pretty high. Terror might be a better word. Terror is morally crippling. People who are in the grip of fear of death, this is not conducive to the physiology of insight, even for the decision-making about their own lives. It's a very primitive state. Looking at what's happening just on the level, a Western level, in terms of brain, this is amygdala hijack. This is not a state in which higher cortical functions flourish. When somebody at first has received a cancer diagnosis, we have an ethical responsibility, I say, to help protect their freedom of choice, their free will. Because no one has free will when they have lost heart and are awash in terror and are essentially an animal ruled by fear. So we know a lot about fear. We know a lot about reassurance, dropping, holding, helping the person come back to that state in which fear is present. No reason why not. But it's in service of the heart. And from that place we go into the deep listening together. What are the choices? What does free will? Authentic will, not crazed animal. Direct in this moment, in this situation for the client. Yeah. Our psychologist yesterday, Marika, talked a lot about this, about the stress that comes from just the whole ambiance. Needs to be recognized, needs to be brought in service of the heart. Okay. Chantal spoke so beautifully about what it is like when we are no longer living in mortal terror of death. We still have what must be called a certain caution. We still have a will to live. This is not passivity. This is not whatever. What's the French equivalent of whatever? People, was it? Okay. This is not whatever. This is a will to live in service of the heart. Okay. How shall it go? I actually think it's worth questioning where discussions of death and mortality enter into our relationship with clients early on. Bernard Shannon was saying that in his intake, he routinely asks, so, are your affairs in order? If you were to die on your way home from this appointment, are there any phone calls you wish you had made? Any messages you would have wanted to give to anyone? I think this is a very good idea. Whatever we can do to help shift the conversation of death so that it is in service of the heart. And when a client has an illness that may well be fatal, to feel what we feel about it in service of the heart, in heart space, so that we are able to ask, so, in light of this reminder of mortality, we don't have to say, given that you're probably going to die, but we can say, in light of this reminder of mortality, what are you thinking? What are you feeling? What are you valuing? Is there anything more important to you than life? Because when we know that, we come into our alignment. And as we have heard many speakers pointing out, and studies from hospice actually show this, those who come into alignment with that which is more important than living or dying settle into a physiological state that is much more conducive to living, even though it's no longer a battle, it's not a fight, it's not a striving, it is wu-wei again. So it is worth asking these questions. I think it is a responsibility, part of our healing work to do so. I was a student of Leon Hammer for many years, long time ago now. I started studying with him when I was 19. Leon Hammer, author of Dragon Rises, Red Bird Flies. I don't know if he is well known here, but he's well known in the States. And he's an amazing pulse diagnostician. And back then, he used to tell all of his students what they were going to die of. Because, we were used as pulse demo models, and we all took each other's pulses and got to know each other pretty well in pulse class. And it was really something else at the age of 19 to be told either stroke or diabetes. And to know that, and it has been very helpful actually, both in terms of, okay, if that's what I'm prone to, what can I do to change future history, extend it further out, but also to kind of come home to the feeling that an ending will come and start to make friends with that. Bernard Shannon also sent me a very funny thing that now has been invented called the ticker, a wristwatch which notes to you how many years, months, weeks, days, hours, and seconds you have left to live. You take an 80-page questionnaire, and then you get to wear this. And the sellers of it laud the virtues of making every moment count. Honestly, when we know that death is coming, when we know that it is real, it's a deep call to alignment, which is in itself a deep call to health and living well. Yeah. I will also note on an economic level, it is astounding in our healthcare budget. All right, I'm not sure about Canada. This is, I'm giving a US statistic, but 25% of Medicare is the last year of a person's life. And most of that is in the last 5 weeks. Doing interventions that may possibly give the person the opportunity to live another week, or to live as a vegetable, to live in incredible pain. I wonder what effect it would have on our use of resources for health and healing if, when we knew that death was likely to be coming for us, it did not come as a shock because it had already seemed normal, like something that would happen. Yeah. So this is the first consideration. Do we say something? Do we not say something? If the person is, I'm gonna beat this, what is our ethical responsibility? Get there right behind them and say, yeah, go team, all right, I'm right behind, we're gonna beat this. Or is our ethical responsibility to the client to say, yes, let's do our best, of course. And given this reminder of your mortality, is there anything that you value more than life? And to question into that. Once we are at that point of actually having death no longer the enemy, and we are in a state where we can go into heart discernment, what do I of my free will choose to do with the information that I have cancer? The next question is, do we treat it or do we not treat it? That may be shocking at first, because we are living at a time when there is such a huge hype around cancer that we think, cancer, treat it immediately. It's the killer that's going to gun you down. You'll be dead. And unbelievable, the amount of fear and the sense that if there is cancer, it must be treated. There is a lot of research coming out which does not necessarily support this. Breast cancer, for instance, we are seeing the statistics have not changed that much. 2% of women die of breast cancer. This is different than, for instance, the 25% that die of heart failure or heart disease. So breast cancer is not the killer that heart disease is, and we're not quite so hysterical about it. So of the 12% of women who get breast cancer, 2% die of it. And now that we are having earlier and earlier diagnosis of breast cancer, we are having more and more incidents of people receiving treatment for breast cancer that they may have died with in old age rather than died from. There are many different kinds of cancer. We must acknowledge this. Even the American Cancer Society defines cancer as more than 100 different diseases characterized by abnormal cell growth. There are, however, kinds of cancer, ductile carcinoma in situ, which the Germans did a really interesting thing. They've been autopsying people who die in car crashes in the Autobahn, and they found that 40% of women between 40 and 50 have breast cancer, and that most women over 50 have breast cancer. 2% of women die of it. There it is not necessarily actually a death threat at all. And we are looking at more and more situations where we now are able to get this diagnosis much sooner, go rushing into invasive responses, radiation, which is near the breast and near the heart. And there goes that heart disease statistic, and chemotherapy, which, well, we know how hard that is on a person's system. So the question of, do we treat this or do we not treat this at all? In men, the story with prostate cancer is very much the same. The older you get, the more likely it is that it is there, but not the more likely that you will die of it. We have in America the standard of care, in United States the standard of care is a mammogram every year when you are over the age of 40. Europe has a different standard, and Denmark, and Sweden, Scandinavian countries, it's once every 3 years after the age of 50. The same mortality rate applies in both countries. However, there's a very different rate of overtreatment. So we need to consider this. There are many cancers that move very slowly. There are others that it's the same mortality rate because they're moving so swiftly that even if you get a mammogram once a year, it could happen between mammograms, and by the time you catch it, it's too late. So we've got situations of genuine ambiguity. Would this life have been saved if I had caught it sooner? And we've got on either side of the bell curve many situations in which, no, it wouldn't have made any difference because it wasn't going to kill them anyway, or no, it wouldn't have made any difference because, you know what? It's already too far gone. The estimate these days is that for every life saved by early screening, 10 women are overtreated. I have for Raymond a list of references for places that you can go. I mean, Google is fantastic. Once you decide that this is worth looking into, there's a lot of information about overdiagnosis and overtreatment in cancer that's out there. But I will give you something that will give you some nice links to click on and just get some sense of this. So, and I have not yet followed this up, but I was reading an article that came out in the New York Times Magazine in April of 2013 that says that there are studies finding that a quarter of breast cancer, there are, how did they put it? It was vague, I need to follow it up, but they said there are findings to suggest that in a quarter of the cases of breast cancer, it may have gone away on its own. Holy moly. And that's the polite response. Where's that heart space? Can I not dissociate from my emotion about this? I have a lot of emotion about this. Can I not dissociate from it? Can I stay in touch with my humanity? Can I open that island of peace? Can I stay in that state in which I am able to bear ambivalence and ambiguity as entry point to a deeper subtlety and a more complex conversation, while remaining moral agent even while feeling? So there's the question, do we treat or do we not treat? And if the decision is, yes, we treat, then comes the question of, well, how shall we treat? One of the things that I also have a great deal of human emotion about and need to open my heart so that there's at least 51% voting majority of Shen in my system, is so many articles all over the place which talk about chemotherapy, how we either do chemotherapy and radiation or we do palliative and quality of life care. The implication to the average reader being, you do chemotherapy and radiation or we prepare for you to die. Those are the choices. Oi. There's very little serious acknowledgement of anything else to do besides chemo and radiation or die. this matters to me a great deal because the choice of chemotherapy and radiation is a big ethical field of inquiry for many reasons. The most important reason being, when anyone does chemotherapy, mutagenic metabolites leave their body, and sewage treatment, wastewater treatment, septic fields are not equipped to filter out carcinogenic mutagens that now enter the water table. Yes, there have been studies showing that carcinogenic mutagens, byproducts, metabolites of chemotherapy, are entering our water supply, and we are drinking them in many regions. There was a wonderful study in, I'll get you where you can look at some very good studies in England. There have been studies in America. There have been studies in Australia. It's a serious concern. For every one person who has chemotherapy, how many children, because they're at the most at risk, because they have the most rapidly growing cells, how many children will end up with cancer? These chemicals have a very long life. The estimate in laboratory is that many of them have a life of 10 to 12 years. And while it is clear from the studies at this point that, yes, we do have a problem, we don't yet have any sense of how big a problem do we have. And I don't see government agencies rushing to design studies to figure this out. What I'm mostly seeing is an eerie silence on the topic of how much damage chemotherapy is doing, not just to the person getting the chemotherapy. In fact, I have been talking to quite a few people about this, and so far, I haven't actually met anyone who says to me, oh yes, I was aware that chemotherapy distributes carcinogenic mutagens into the environment where people can drink them. How many people here did not know this? So quite a few, quite a few. This is one of those places where we need to be great of heart, truly great of heart, in order to be able to consider, oh my goodness, what now? What do I think? How do I discern? How do I make choices? Who shall regulate medical treatments that are medically harmful to others? So, this is a conversation that I actually would love to have as many people as possible know about before they have cancer. Because I must say, it is a difficult thing to say to somebody who has cancer and is being hounded into chemotherapy or else, to say, and I have children. You have children. Do you know the heritage? It does, again, lead us to all sorts of questions which have a kind of bell curve in terms of their clarity. There are situations where it does seem as though chemo is very effective. Childhood leukemia, Hodgkin's, there are people who actually get, very good long-term results on chemo. These tend to be the more rare cancers. The estimate is 2 to 4% of cancers do well long-term on chemo. That leaves 96 to 98% that don't have such wonderful results. In many cases, fairly negligible results. Breast cancer, lung cancer, and colon cancer being among them. So there are those who it seems more clear that yes, this actually would be helpful. There are a lot of situations in which it's pretty clear that the client is going to die There is no turning this around. And yet the client goes down with round after round after round of chemo, trying to stave off. And perhaps even the client might decide differently about doing yet another round of chemo and yet another round of chemo if they knew that they are taking some of the life of the planet under with them. Or it's loaded language. If they knew that there's ecological consequence to their decision. And then there's the middle area, where we don't know. But it's worth questioning and thinking and looking at the data so that we can perhaps discern what is my Ming, what is my destiny walk, what do I decide as a free agent, what shall I do? Part of this is going to involve learning to understand doctor speak and research speak a little bit better. Because what is defined as efficacy of a chemotherapy agent is 50% or more tumor reduction in a 28-day period. That's effective chemotherapy. I almost have no comment about that. Once again, I return to heart in full acknowledgement of my humanity, not dissociating from it, recognizing, okay, I am, as I stand here, temporarily not a moral agent, temporarily not ethically responsible, just pissed off. And call us to looking more closely at what efficacy means. A round of chemotherapy that costs thousands and thousands of dollars, that is considered effective because it will create tumor reduction of 50% over a 28-day period. However, it is not necessarily shown to cure cancer or to extend life at all. This is effective. So one of the things we need to work with in order to help our clients make good decisions about chemo is in the trade-offs, you, the planet, in the trade-offs, quality of life or hope for a longer life. What do you mean effective? The big promise of chemotherapy is that it will kill metastatic cells in your body. It's not borne out by the data particularly. It's worth spending time that cannot be fear-ridden, hunted animal time looking at this. They did a really wonderful study in Australia where what they did was take all of the studies that had been done, mostly Australian and United States studies, and analyze them for looking at, when we look at it in terms of 5-year survival, for whom was chemotherapy effective, for what percentage. And what they came to was it helped extend life, at least within a 5-year period, for 2.3% of Australians and 2.1% of Americans from the United States. I haven't been hearing much about that on the media. This has been published in major journals. It's out there. It's not being talked about. It's not being brought to people's attention. My sense is that it needs to be brought to people's attention before they have cancer, so that this can already have percolated into our awareness. Helping our clients ask their physician better questions is also important. Physicians are in a tough position. In many countries, certainly in Canada and the United States, there's standards of care, and there are decisions made from above about what one can and can't do. So there's both government regulation about this, and there is what insurance will pay for. These are two very important factors that a physician lives with, or he can have his license taken away, or be quite harassed. There's also the whole question of, if somebody dies, can the physician show that they did absolutely everything possible to prevent it, even if it was likely futile and carcinogenic to the planet? So physicians are in a very difficult situation, and I'm not sure what our role is likely to be in helping them to be able to speak more freely and explore more freely. There's also the case that physicians often do what they've been told by government agencies, by insurance agencies, and don't look at what the alternatives are. There's a lot of training invested in learning to work with chemotherapy, and what is that saying? I don't know if it's in French also, but to a person who has a hammer in their hand, everything looks like a nail. There's also times when the physicians themselves don't understand the research and the statistics in how they've been presented. For instance, there is a difference between what's called relative risk reduction and absolute risk reduction. And there are chemotherapy drugs that are marketed by saying that they give you a 50% reduction in your risk of recurrence of cancer. Relative risk, not absolute risk. 50% reduction of risk means it goes from 4% to 2%. That's 50%, yeah? However, if neither the physician nor the client understands that this is relative risk, not absolute risk, and that when we know the difference, the picture looks very different, it's very hard to make good decisions. Has it really not been even 30 minutes yet? Excuse me? It's almost 60. You didn't tell me! Okay. I was going to have somebody, all right. So before I say anything else, it's been almost 60 minutes. Would you stand up for a moment? I meant to only keep you sitting down for 30 minutes. Okay. Just stand up for a moment here. It's inhumane to keep, I think. I can't sit for that long without getting real fidgety. And what I'd like for you to do is clockwise around your table, take a stretch walk. Just walk around the table and stretch your way around the table in a clockwise fashion until you get back to your seat. Take a walk around the table. This is not musical chairs, but... walk around the table, stretching. Good. And then, when you get back to your seat, don't sit yet. Let's do counterclockwise, but do a shake it loose walk around the table. Just do a shake it loose. Like, how loose can you get? In one, movement around that table. You can even go, it helps. Yeah, I'm sorry, you guys. We could have done this sooner. But there I was ranting and raving like an evangelist. All right, good. That's good stuff. That's worthwhile. Ooh. Okay. Blah, blah, blah. It's good to be alive. You can remain standing if you like, or you can sit. It's totally up to you. I encourage all fidgeting and stretching at any time during any lecture that I ever give. Yeah. So what are we talking about? We're talking about the ethics of statistics. And learning how to look at them, learning how to not just swallow it. One of the big ones for for mammograms and early detection was this idea that, this is a quotation, the 5-year survival rate for breast cancer, if caught early, is 98%. Without early detection, it drops to 23%. However, if you look at how the statistics were generated, they had a specific end point. And what it actually turns out is, how to explain this? If you have 100 women who at age 67 feel a lump, and they die at age 70, then you have early detection and those same women find out when they're 64, and they still die at 70? The statistics are fabulous. It looks great. They've survived for so much longer because of early detection. No. There was just a lot more time because they knew about it sooner. So we need to become savvy about this. This is a statistic that, I don't know, I'll send you links to that also, but it's one that when somebody disputed it, they took it off their website, but did not further explain. Another statistic that calls us as practitioners to really support our clients, that a great many clients don't always really understand from their physicians that chemotherapy and radiation may not lengthen their life or increase their survival chances at all. In one study, 69% of lung cancer clients, 81% of colon cancer clients did not understand that chemotherapy was not at all likely to cure their cancer. Ow. How do we support our clients when they've entered a kind of funnel? Yeah. So why is all this happening? How is all this happening? What do we do with this? And it comes down to politics and money, which is another way of saying it comes down to the power of the consumer voice. It comes down to our clients and ourselves speaking up and putting our health money where it can make a difference. I can't remember who it was who was talking. Was it the gentleman from Vietnam who said there's no money in prevention? Who's going to make a buck off of that? So there isn't a great deal of research on what is actually causing cancer that we can do something about. Well, how about something about the chemicals? How about something about chemotherapy itself? How about something about the all right, calm down, Thea. This is difficult. It's difficult. I can only hope that my active demonstration of how difficult it is to think about these things without losing heart is an opportunity for none of us here to feel ashamed if we have moments of kind of losing it. I think it's actually fine to lose it so long as we recognize it and say, okay, I now have some steam coming out of my ears. I'm not an effective moral agent just at this moment. I'm not insight prone. It's a self-care moment, not a strategy moment. And draw upon the light that comes through us all and allows us to rest in the most noble and great-hearted aspect of ourselves, so as to be able to look at things that are painful. There are quite a few places where people have come up with methods for reducing tumor, methods for either curing or controlling cancer. However, it takes a lot of money to be able to run a drug trial. Close to $1 billion to run a drug trial that the FDA is likely to approve of. Although the big pharmaceutical companies say that is not true, it doesn't take $1 billion, it takes close to 90 million. Oh, sorry. However, I mean, we have in Canada, what do you call that stuff? Dichloroacetic acid? Group of scientists who came up with dichloroacetic acid as a way to non-toxically reduce tumors without causing side effects by working with the difference between growing cells and non-growing cells. I don't know, I'm not a scientist, but write in Google, Canada, cancer, dichloroacetic acid. Interesting stories. I have personal friends who are working for a biotech company that has left Canada for the Bahamas so that there's a little more freedom, that has created an algae that when injected into tumors dissolves them. Carcinogenic. Tumors. However, they cannot get a drug company interested because algae is cheap. You can grow it in your sink. So no drug company figures that it's worth doing the trials because having spent 90 million or 1 billion on the drug trials, how are they going to recoup that kind of money? It's the same thing with the dichloroacetic acid. They estimate that it would cost about 4 cents a day to use that. There was a gentleman in America who directed the drug part of the FDA, Food and Drug Association, from 1973 to 1982, a man named Richard Kraut, C-R-O-U-T, not K-R-A-U-T, who has made a number of statements like, I have not and I never will give a drug patent to an individual, only to a large corporation with unlimited funds. He has also made the clear statement that the FDA is here to serve industry, not the public, and that that's its clear mandate. This is difficult. It's difficult. So part of what it happens is that we have agencies that in order to give evidence-based medicine, what is considered evidence is quite packaged, is quite manipulated, such that it costs a lot to get that evidence, and such that the trials are actually not capable of model fit validity for the actual cures. For instance, the disaster around Laetrile, which when more holistic, non-toxic approaches are taken for cancer, it's not a magic bullet approach. You can't give, nobody was giving or finding success with only giving Laetrile. It's Laetrile and dietary counseling and, there's a whole lot that went into it. Supplements, all kinds of stuff. Not Laetrile alone. So that didn't come out looking too good. There are many different situations where it's not going to be a unifaceted approach, and that people like Dr. Lawrence Burton in the Bahamas or Dr. Stanislaw Brzezinski in Texas are doing incredible work, but they're not doing just one thing. They're taking a multidimensional approach and they're tailoring it for each individual client. How easy is it to do a double-blind study like that when you can't narrow it down to one ingredient and you can't say it's the same for everybody? So we have problems here. We also have outright harassment much of the time. I mean, Dr. Brzezinski, what he went through, was it Brzezinski or was it Burton? Dr. Burton where he finally got the FDA to say, okay, let's take a look at it. And the NCI, the National Cancer Institute, said, let's design a study. And his approach is not to cure cancer, but to control it. There are people who are still alive with their tumor 15, 20 years later. So he does not claim to cure cancer, he just claims that you can live a good life and have the tumor still there. They insisted on designing a trial that would hinge on tumor reduction. Back to the heart. And this time with grief. Yeah. Where this comes down for me is that I personally, as an herbalist, I have been studying herbs for the past 30 years. I've been in practice for the past 25. For the past 15, I have made a focus on people with cancer. I like working with that terrain. And as an herbalist, I gained a good deal of proficiency at helping my clients to weather chemotherapy and radiation. It's hard to say well, because the clients themselves were miserable and often said, I don't know if this is working. And I said, let's call your oncologist. And the oncologist would say, it's fantastic. I can't believe how well they're doing. So doing really fantastically well on chemo with support from herbs and acupuncture still feels miserable. So I got very good at this. I invested a great deal of time and energy in it. Before I found out all these various things, the first one that hit me like a blow was about chemotherapy and its and what it did for the environment. And I had to go into that moral quandary of, just because I've been doing it for 15 years, does that make it right? Just because I don't want to feel how complicated life now is. What do I do with all my skills? I've invested a lot in them. Do I really want to be skewing the statistics that make chemo and radiation look better? Because essentially, that is one of the effects of being complementary medicine rather than alternative medicine. We need to look at, do we want to be complementary medicine for chemo and radiation? And you know that when they make the statistics, they won't say, and this is with Chinese medicine included, necessarily. Do we want to be supporting this? Is that where we want to put our expertise? In Al-Anon, it's called enabling. I personally made the decision that I didn't think I could do it anymore. Even though this was an important part of my livelihood and my profession and my expertise. Part of why I'm going to be giving the day-long lecture tomorrow on lessons from herbal strategies is to harvest all those years of working well within the system and say, okay, what can we learn from this so that we can use this powerfully in other ways? We have a medicine that's all about harmony. That's all about returning back to balance. And we are using that return back to balance in order to support something that essentially derives from warfare. Chemotherapy, like pesticides in agriculture, comes as a byproduct of World War II. The chemical agents that were used as poisons then got put to use in medicine and agriculture, pesticides. And part of an attitude of whatever is bothering us, let's kill it thoroughly. It's not a Taoist means. I am not sure where we go from here. I would not trust any quick or easy answers. I would rather say, I'm going to take some time to feel a whole lot of things about this within the field of the heart. And I'm going to take some time to support my small intestine to filter and discern and ask more questions before I know where to go. Although I will certainly recommend just spreading the data, because the more hearts filled with Shen have the opportunity for insight, and the more we spend our time coming together in heart space, coming together knowing that we are the light coming through, feeling that quality of in touch with our humanity, but not overly in the sway of our humanity. Just sharing that experience of more data, more heart space, more opportunity for insight to come as a collective, I have more hope for that. Okay, that's the worst of it all. Bismillah. Take a moment, just because I don't want to leave you with this, take a moment to put hand on heart area. And let yourself feel the ocean inside of you, the ocean of your humanity, everything in you that has been stirred, everything in you that is moved and moving. Accepting it, not trying to squash it. Some of our finest virtues are born of deep feeling, cherishing every bit of it. And breathing open in the center of the heart. I often will make a motion with my hand to help encourage the area. Breathing open the island of peace right in the middle of it, so that we can afford to come down from the control tower of the head and get right into the open void space, the full emptiness. Empty because spacious, full because of the light. And see if you can feel. There is a human here and there is a light also. There is a lantern here, shaped like a person. Could be a man, could be a woman. And see if you can feel, oh, I am a lantern. I am a light bearer. I may think I am a man. I may think I am a woman. Actually, I am light coming through a woman. Actually, I am light coming through a man. How much light? See if you can breathe open. How about more light? Feeling how it feels to be a lantern in a room surrounded by lanterns. You don't even need to open your eyes. Sometimes it's easier to see with eyes shut. That feeling of, I am a lantern surrounded by lanterns. The lanterns have different shapes. The lanterns have different color eyes. Some are taller, some are shorter. I'm in a room surrounded by lanterns. Good. And you might want to feel for, is it possible to open your eyes a little bit? And begin to allow light to come in at the same time as letting light shine out. Might want to see if you can stand as a lantern without letting go of your lanternhood. See if you can stand. Folks are not into that idea, huh? Or it's just slow. Yeah. This lantern belongs to the earth, native son or daughter. This lantern is carrier medium of heaven. Try breathing to find out. Do the heavens enter me? Then yes, I am a carrier medium of heaven. Surrounded by others who are carrier medium of heaven. And checking, is there a light? How much light? How about more light? It doesn't take trying, it takes untrying. Will I allow more light? Feeling for the other people in this room, also lantern, also native son and daughter of heaven and earth. Yes. The field of shared Shen, shared illumination, shared insight that we create, it gives us enough greatness of heart to weather many storms of emotion and make of them the seeds of virtue. Okay. You may sit if you wish, but you never have to stop being lanterns. In fact, you can't help yourselves, really. Yeah. I have a yellow light. I'm not sure what that means. Does that means I have such and such many minutes left? What does that mean? Somebody tell me loudly. 10 minutes. All right. Well, I'm not sure that I have any more to say. I suppose it is then traditional to ask questions.
It's not so much a question, but a comment. I'm very enthused by whatever works you've been doing. I've been studying your manual. I was given at the workshop on the wood element you gave to us in April this year. And I'll work the open heart way, as you're teaching us, so I'll talk the open heart. Don't be offended. You make me think of Joan of Arc.
I'm not understanding.
You make me think of Joan of Arc.
Joan of Arc.
Do you
I would
know
like
her?
a different fate.
Yes, yes. But you understand that before she carries the mission, there's a period of confusion, and there's, I won't talk about the history, but even the physical figure, you have a lot of her. But we never saw her really. The only painters made her look in a way or another. There was another figure in American history, it's Ralph Nader. You know, the car industry at one point, and he came up and stood frank and directly and had a direct effect on people. Ralph Nader?
Ah, yes.
Okay. You brought to me a lot of confusion about about the use of chemotherapy. I accept the confusion. I don't like it, but I'll take it. Yeah, that's part of being here.
I have been saying all since I got here, oh, I love these people, they're so wonderful, I am so sorry for what I'm going to say.
Yeah, but it's open heart, so we'll accept it. I'll take it. And because the confusion is a long period, I can't comment on what you've said. I'll think about it, and I'll take the time and assess it and everything. But we lived in 2009, a real period of terror.
Wait, I'm not understanding again.
In 2009, there was the H1N1 invasion, contamination. People got sick, and there were like lineups of people to get the shot. And afterwards, a year after, everyone knew that Glaxo Wellcome, their product, was like on a scale of $13 a product, came to $250 a bottle. Yeah, this is like, but the main aspect, why I'll be the earth element now, which gives me optimism, sort of like good optimism. During that time, I met 400 patients. Everyone asked me one question. It's the first time in my career everyone asked me one single question. Should I get the shot or not? The flu shot. And the answer I gave was, you have the right to choose. And in the statistics now about the subject is that although there was a lot of lineups, a lot of noise about it, half of the population did not get the flu shot. In Quebec, the population, and it was free. You could go and get it. And although there was a lot of noise, everyone talked about it, 50% of the people didn't go and get it. And I thought that was a good sense of strength of people, resistance to terror, and it tells a lot of like how strong and right people are and can be. Thank you.
Thank you. I would say that what gives me optimism is that nobility feels good. That living heart-centered and living with alignment feels good, is good for our health. It's just that many people have lost heart and are discouraged and do not know that they have the option of living well, meaning with heart and with alignment under any circumstances. And so to be able to presence that and invite that means that we can create something grassroots. Possibly easier in Canada than in the United States, I don't know. It's a lovely thing that I have heard from you.
Yeah, I just want to thank you for your present and your teaching. It's very inspiring. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other question or comment?
Here I am. Claude, je vais te demander de traduire. Pour plus de confort, je vais parler en français.
Okay. Yeah, great.
Quand on parle de la chimiothérapie, en fait, quand on parle de cancer, je pense que la plupart des gens meurent de peur. Il y a beaucoup de peur associée à ça. Et effectivement, dans les médias, il y a beaucoup de désinformation. Absolument.
This may be strategic.
Absolument. Je pense qu'il y a beaucoup de désinformation. Et les médias ont à voir là-dedans. Elijah, aujourd'hui, tu apportes une vision plus sociale, une vision d'ensemble, plus connectée à l'unité, plus taoïste, plus unité.
Oui.
Et quand on reçoit un diagnostic de cancer, si on pouvait être plus branché justement dans notre cœur, puis pas sombrer dans de la panique et de la terreur, comme moi ça m'est arrivé, peut-être que les patients pourraient prendre d'autres décisions. Peut-être qu'ils choisiraient la chimio, mais peut-être aussi qu'ils auraient envie d'essayer autre chose. Donc, je pense effectivement que la voix du cœur et de l'information, chaîne, dans ces cas-là, est une voie d'espoir pour la planète puis pour chaque individu aussi.
If I were not standing on a stage, I would probably burst into tears. Thank you for your words. Yes.
Thank you.
We are our hope. Yeah. It is still yellow. However, if the boat has reached the harbor, then we will be complete. All right, my beloveds, all right, my comrades in heart, thank you so much for our meeting today. Thank you.